a lot more popular. CyberArk is certainly the largest of the companies that have the enterprise password vaults and have expanded beyond just that niche. They're being deployed more broadly, so that way what was originally for primarily managing service account passwords now are managing AD admin and domain admin credentials. Typically CyberArk or Thycotic Secret Server, although like I said, most of what I see is CyberArk. And there's usually a reconciliation account for the system that's in domain admins. This reconciliation account will automatically reach out to an account, check to make sure the password is still valid, that it's managing. If it is not currently under control and the password's been changed outside of the system, then the password vault system will reach out and change it to a password that it knows. And it will note that and move on. And there's additional components to augment security, such as a session manager, which is when you connect to the password vault. It works basically like an RDP proxy. You connect to that, and then you connect directly to the system. You never see the username, you never see the password. So let's see what this looks like. There's a couple different scenarios here that are interesting. We have our workstation, we have our password vault, and our admin server. Traditionally, we've had the workstation connect directly through the admin server via RDP. This is not that much different. So we connect to our password vault and we check out our password. So we're connecting to that website through HTTPS, so it's secured. And then we're going to copy that password down. So that password is now copied onto that workstation. We can paste it into the RDP logon window and then connect into RDP. This way we don't have to look at that long 30-character string of random characters and type them in manually, get it wrong, get it wrong, get it wrong, lock out the account. So we're going to copy it, paste it, and we're good to go. Of course, there's an issue here because we're using a regular user account on a regular workstation in order to gather this information. There's another PowerSploit function called Get Clipboard Contents, which is a way to pull data out of the Windows clipboard, which is what happens when you copy data using Control-C or copy. And so, again, there's another file here that gets dropped onto the system when it notices that there's an actually, probably the best way to do it is when the title of a web browser says CyberArk, we just kick this off. Because probably someone's going to be copying contents into the clipboard. And once we do that, we can identify some interesting things that end up in the clipboard through this PowerSploit function. And so with that, we can leverage that information in order to connect into that system at the same time. We can also use another PowerSploit function called Get Timed Screenshot, which enables us to identify, even if we just have the password, what credentials are actually going to be used if they're stored. We can also extract that from the registry if we really want to. So that's one way that it can be done, checking out the password. The second method that is often configured is, as I mentioned, that session manager or RDP proxy. This is where the password vault is the jump system to perform the administration with zero knowledge of the account password. There is an enterprise password vault vendor that says this is what you should do and you don't need admin workstations, which I completely disagree with. Why? Let's find out. So again, we're going to connect to the password vault via HTTPS, so it's secured. And we're then just going to click connect and go right through to the admin server via RDP. Simple, right? Nothing ends up on the workstation. Seems very secure. I don't see any problems with this. But I have some questions. What account is to log on to the workstation? And what account is used to log on to the password vault? I'd say 9 out of 10 times it's the same account. So the user account has access to gather the privileged credential data that's in the password vault. And I'd say probably about 60, 70% of the time, that's protected through MFA. Maybe. Hopefully. So we look at the process and we say, okay, that's interesting from the authentication method, but who administers that password vault server? Based on what I've seen, a lot of times this password vault server, which stores privileged credentials for Active Directory domain admin accounts, is just in the server's OU, managed by the servers team, with the same group policy managing it that manages all the other servers. Because our password vault server is just like any other, right? It's not like it's a domain controller that has credentials. And then the other question is, are the network communications limited to the password vault? 9 times out of 10, the entire network is able to connect to the password vault web server or website, which again has some concern. And then probably the part of this that I think is the most interesting is this part right here, this whole part right here. Because how do they connect to the password vault? It's a website. So why don't we just try compromising the user's web browser? Because what web browser are they going to use to connect to CyberArk? The same one that they use to go on Facebook and Reddit and all the other stuff, right? Maybe, hopefully not. But if we're able to get onto the system and have admin rights to it, we could drop in another extension, like maybe this one here. I'm being very subtle, by the way. And if we're able to do this and add an extension, we can watch all the traffic that goes back and forth with this web browser, which means we don't need to do anything else. We can just kind of piggyback into that session. And like I said, if we're looking at the password vault administration, we can go through and look to see who the users are. And there's Eddie. Damn it, Eddie. Eddie has all the rights in this organization. There's usually one, which means that our dinosaurs are running loose. And even if we have everything else done right, if we're not protecting who has administrative rights to our password vault, there's a problem. The other thing I find very interesting is that people put these on the internet. So I ran some Shodan searches and I saw that there were CyberArk systems that were on the internet. A few of them actually, and one that's kind of old, which is a problem, which I'll talk about in just a minute. But there's a number of these weaknesses that I've discovered as we're working with customers that have gone all in on password vaults. And I've actually talked to some CyberArk consultants after I've talked about this at other conferences. And they said, yeah, we talked to our customers about making sure they do the best practices. And I said, well, I don't think the message is getting to them because this is the way I keep seeing things configured. Because these are pretty common. And then, of course, the big one at the bottom is if there's a vulnerability or a way to get into the password vault, then that could result in Active Directory compromise. So hopefully there has not been any kind of vulnerability in any kind of password vault and that they're very, oh wait. Okay, yeah, that's bad. So last year, there was a red team from Germany that identified a security vulnerability in CyberArk that was a way to bypass authentication and actually get RCE into it based on the REST API and the way that the tokens were being handled as part of that. So very complicated method of doing it, but effectively they created a malicious serialized.NET object and passed that into that connection. So when I talk about limiting who has the ability to connect to the CyberArk web server or your password vault web server, there's a really good reason for that. Because it was very nice of this team to let CyberArk know about it and get this fixed. But I'm pretty sure that the nation states are not as generous in their sharing of 0 days. So when it comes to enterprise password vaults, there's some best practices. We want to make sure that our administration is secure. We want to make sure that only admin accounts can manage that. We want to make sure that we restrict access to this. We treat it like a domain controller ultimately. And then we secure that authentication. What we recommend is not using a user account, the regular user account, to get those credentials. We recommend don't use your admin account to get those credentials. We talk about the concept of a transition account. It's another account that has no rights, and the only thing it's ever used for is to get those credentials. MFA that account, and that way there's some additional protection there, especially if you're using a user workstation. There's some other things that could be done when you're using an admin workstation. But we want to ensure that there's a tiered process of how to get access to those credentials, and there's not just a way to jump right into it. And then certainly split out the roles to separate servers when possible. CyberArk has their agent that reaches out to change the password on systems. That regularly reaches back and talks to the vault. If the web server is that server, then that's a problem. CyberArk says not to do that, but a lot of times organizations will have one server that has all the roles on it that does everything. And that server, of course, is in the